Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new League of Legends video. So if you've been paying attention to the forums, maybe looking at certain posts around the internet or seen the recent LCS games, well, you've noticed probably something very interesting. In NRG's game, Ganked by Mom ended up picking Zed for the mid lane, but he didn't build Zed in a very normal or usual type way. Instead, he actually ended up building him as a sort of tank, off-tank bruiser type Zed. Now obviously doing something that is not really common, especially on an assassin champion, will get people talking. And I'm sure not only do a lot of people want to actually try this for themselves and see is this really that good, but also they want to really understand it. Why is it good? When or why should I play it? And for the most part, how do I play it? So like the runes, the masteries, items, and all that good stuff. Well, don't worry, I got you guys covered. I jumped into a few games right away, tested it out for myself, and here I am with this video. We'll start the video off by showing you the build, the runes, and the masteries so you can take it into your games and actually understand what the build is. And following that, we will be discussing this build, talking about if it's good, if it's bad, when it's good, when it's bad, and I'll give you my final rating at the end of the video. So very quickly, the question of this video is going to be, what are your thoughts on this tanky bruiser type Zed build? And if you end up enjoying this video, make sure to definitely hit that like button. Alright, so let's start things off by taking a look at what items you want to get when playing this tanky kind of off-tank bruiser type Zed. So you want to start the game off by picking up the Doran shield and a potion. Now starting with the Dorans isn't absolutely vital or core. I mean, you can still go longsword, you can maybe even go cloth armor or boots. But the Dorans just seems to fit the build idea much better, obviously being somewhat tanky. And it'll also give you that little bit of extra HP, which will definitely help the Titanic Hydra once you finally do get it. Moving on to the core items that Ganked by Mom got, which in my opinion are also very good: Maw Malmortius, Titanic Hydra, and most likely the Sterak's Gauge. Maw because, well, it is still considered a defensive tanky type item since it does give you a lot of magic resistance, the extra shield once you get lower on HP, and the item is overall just perfect for the greater scheme of things. For boots, it does come down to preference and what you're facing. Now Ganked by Mom seem to prefer the boots of swiftness because the mobility is just very useful. The reduced duration on slows is nice as well, but again, you can also go Mercury Treads, you can go the armor boots, or something that I personally like in this build, the Ionian boots. The reason I like these boots is because, as you'll soon see in the runes, there's no CDR, you have no CDR in any of your items, so having a little bit there is pretty nice. Titanic Hydra is probably the most core item in this build because it essentially makes your build and you build around this item. Following that, Sterak's Gauge is overall a well-rounded item as well, fairly cheap, gives you a lot of stats, makes you very tanky, and works with Titanic Hydra exceptionally. Now the items to choose from. Now this is where things can get a little more difficult. It depends again on what you're facing. I mean, Deadman's Plate with the bonus damage you have as you actually activate it and auto attack your target is very nice. So if the enemy team has a decent amount of AD damage, well, I highly recommend this item. I also think Bloodthirster is quite good because at the end of the day, it is an offensive item, but the shield that it offers is considered to be a defensive type stat, since it essentially overall makes your effective HP higher. Mercurial Scimitar is not a bad choice either, and I usually recommend getting Black Cleaver as probably your final item or maybe your fifth item. At the end of the day, having some of that armor penetration is still quite good, and Black Cleaver offers quite a decent amount of HP, scaling well with your Titanic Hydra. So the idea here is for your other items to choose from, if the item has a combination of HP with some offensive stats, so like Deadman's or Black Cleaver, it will probably work quite well in the build. But now that we got that out of the way, I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, what are the runes and masteries? So let's cover that next. So taking a look at the masteries first, 12, 18, 0 seems to be the choice of masteries for Ganked by Mom. At the end of the day, it does make sense. I mean, the attack speed is actually quite nice, and I'll explain why in a bit. The extra HP gained in the lane will help you with that as well. I mean, the extra damage from 5% if you kill 5 different people will be nice. Thunderlords being absolutely vital. It just simply works. Now, if you want, you can definitely take the 12 points from Ferocity and put it in the defensive tree instead. I don't think it'll make too much of a difference as long as you have 18 points in the Cunning tree. But taking a look at the runes, now this is where things were a little bit interesting. So his runes in his LCS game were Flat AD Reds, Flat Armor Yellows, flat MR blues, and flat attack speed quints. So when it comes to changing things up here, if you really want to, you can probably switch out the flat armor yellows for HP per level instead to further synergize with your Titanic Hydra. But keep in mind that those HP per level yellows won't really help you too much in the laning phase. And for the blues, if you really want to, you can probably take them out and put in some CDR, but it shouldn't matter too much. Now the part to me that's interesting is the quints. He ended up going for the 14% increased attack speed, or in other words, having 4.5 on all 3 of the quints. So when testing this out, I have to say I was pleasantly surprised at how fast the attack animation in the laning phase felt when CSing. It just felt really nice and smooth, so it's just one of those things you gotta go into a game and try it out for yourself. But if I were to guess, his reasoning for running the attack speed quints is because, again, you are tank Zed, and a lot of your damage, especially after you use your ultimate, is going to be coming from the Titanic Hydra active. So the extra attack speed will make you have your attack with the Titanic Hydra bonus damage applied to your target faster. And at the end of the day, with a tanky Zed build, having the extra attack speed will mean that you'll probably have more sustained overall DPS done. So when you really think about it, it does make sense. So now that you have a basic idea on how the build can look like, let's talk more about it. When is it good? Is it actually even good? Is it worth playing? Let's talk about that. So what exactly are the good parts of this build, and why should I even care about it? Well, from my experience so far, it has a durable laning phase. I mean, having the flat armor, the flat MR, the Doran shield, you are quite tanky. So you overall just feel a bit safer, and I have to say, for the most part, it is a good feeling. And your damage when it comes to the harass, especially with the damage from Thunderlords, its base damage being still quite high, it doesn't really feel like you're lacking too much damage at all. At the end of the day, the base damage on Zed's abilities isn't anything to laugh at, so you are going to still be quite a threat. He also has a little bit of synergy with his items. So for instance, again, if you have Deadman's Plate and Titanic Hydra, you use your ultimate on the target, you activate the Titanic Hydra, it does bonus damage, it applies to the Deathmark damage, you have the damage from your Deadman's Plate as well. It all comes together and it works quite nice. And the cool thing is you can actually initiate teamfights because, again, you are going to be quite durable with this build, so you can take a little bit of punishment. And the interesting thing about this is the fact that you are obviously still playing Zed, so when you initiate a fight and you are fairly tanky, the enemy team is still going to look at you as Zed, as an assassin, as a big threat, and they'll still try to do everything they can to try and focus you down, and little do they know you are going to be taking a lot more punishment than the usual Zed. This can easily bait in a lot of people and give your team a little bit more breathing room. In my opinion, one of the main things that's making this work quite well at the moment is the fact that the damage from Thunderlords and the base damage it provides is nothing to laugh at. So even though you are still technically sacrificing some damage in order to opt for the slightly more tanky route, the Thunderlord's damage is still kind of keeping you up there to the point where your damage is still very much relevant. It can snowball quite well, obviously not as strong as just going full assassin type Zed, but again, you are going to be snowballing decently well. Your mid game will still be very strong. And I will admit that I was surprised at how strong the mid game was, even though I did have a decent amount of tanky type items. So it just overall feels very annoying to play against, and I wouldn't want to face this at the very moment. So if your team has a ridiculous amount of damage and maybe you can use a little bit of extra tankiness within the team, this is probably a decent option. But taking a look at the other side of the coin, the bad things, the negatives of this build, and reasons why maybe you won't want to play it. First and foremost, it scales very poorly into late game, so if you get to 45 minutes or so, well, you're not going to be doing a lot of damage, you're not scaling very well, you are going to be tanky, but you don't have a lot of CC in your kit, so you aren't going to be very useful. So try not to make the game last that long. Also, Sterak's Gauge, even though it is a fairly decent item on Zed because the item is just so darn good, it's not as amazing on Zed specifically. And the reason for that is because pretty much every single Zed ability except for his ultimate is scaling off of bonus attack damage. It doesn't scale off of your base attack damage. So that part is a little bit unfortunate, but at the end of the day, it's still a good item. Is this tank Akali version 2.0? That is the big question right now. I really hope it isn't, because I don't feel like Assassin should be played in such a weird and awkward way of just building mainly tank type items. They should be building raw AD items and playing like a true assassin. So it is still kind of awkward to play, and it isn't the true way you should be playing Zed. So if your team has a decent amount of tanks already and maybe not a lot of just raw damage, and you decide to play this tanky bruiser Zed, you better hope you finish the game by 35 minutes. And you also better hope that they don't have a Kog'Maw, Vayne, Fiora, or things like that. And now, as usual with these types of videos, I will end it off with my final thoughts and my final rating. So I decided to give this a rating of 6.5 out of 10, I mean, I think it does have some uses and it could be actually quite strong if you use it correctly. But to me, it feels like you need a team that is somewhat coordinated and is somewhat useful. If you're playing solo queue and you have to solo carry the game because let's say everyone else on your team is not doing so hot, it doesn't feel like this can just flat out hard carry. Or at least not as much as if you were to build Zed in the usual type way, full assassin. But it is a very interesting and different take on playing this assassin champion Zed, and I do like it and I think it's quite fun. So at the end of the day, I do recommend trying this out. I mean, the build is not bad, but it's nothing absolutely out of this world crazy overpowered. It is just a very okay build that can definitely work in the proper situations or scenarios. But if I had to choose between playing this build and playing the usual full assassin type Zed build, I'll probably still go with the full assassin. But if you're playing top lane Zed and you obviously need to bring a little bit of tankiness and off tank to your team, well, this is actually quite a decent option. But that is about it for this video, guys. There you have it, the new tank bruiser type Zed build that Gank My Mom did in LCS, the one you're probably hearing about all over the internet at the very moment. I hope I made it clear enough to give you guys an idea on what this build is, how it works, what you should get, if it's good, if it's bad. And if I did and you enjoyed the video, definitely please hit that like button, share it with your friends so other people have an idea of this build as well, since you'll probably be seeing it in your games. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet, and definitely check out my other videos as well, such as the one where I discuss how strong is Aurelion Sol so far. But thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you for the next video. Peace.